All right, so resources for a more inclusive research practice. Here we go. So what we'll cover, just want to cover a few ground rules. I'm not an expert. I don't consider myself to be one. I'm here to amplify resources and ideas and concepts that I have found and found to be very helpful. There is definitely no one size fits all method. So that is why I'm presenting this as resources and not a how-to. Um, as you dig into the reading, you'll find that no one presents inclusive research as a how-to and more of you really got to find the context that fits your needs. This presentation is not exhaustive. We're just kind of breaking the ice here and diving into a few foundational resources. And I hope to continue this maybe as like a little series to continue our resource share as we find things, especially since this field is very fluid and will always be fluid. Alrighty, and one surefire way to increase your humility toward inclusivity is to just read. That is currently what I'm doing, and that's really the only thing that I can suggest is to just keep reading. Um, Alrighty, and I know I called it an inclusive research methodology presentation, but I just want to come right out and say inclusive isn't the one-all be-all word for this concept that we're discussing today. Here are a couple other terms that you should be very familiar with, and there are more. And again, this field is very fluid and evolving, and it's growing. It's life. I don't think there will never be. An end to learning. So just keep in mind, we're talking about things that are anti-oppressive, anti-racist, community-based, decolonizing, emancipatory, indigenous, liberatory, and more. And you may have already seen this in other presentations. Every presentation that I've partook in that deals with inclusivity and liberation focuses on Indigenous methodologies and Indigenous land acknowledgements. So I'll just give this a read here real quick for you all. Indigenous peoples are not extinct. They are still here today and continue to live on this land despite a history of erasure, forced removal, and genocide. Naming is an exercise in power when what was being named has been historically erased. As an activist, I would like to take this opportunity to commit myself to the struggle against systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their land and denied their rights. You can go today onto this link here at the bottom, and I just want to say that everything I discuss in this presentation, all the resources I talk about, are included in a resource links document, a Google Doc. And the link to the doc is in the chat, and I'll post it again at the end of the talk. And I'll post it on the Slack channel, so it'll be available to everyone. And the link to the website to access this information, as well as the map that you see here on your screen, is available in that resource doc. And so today I'm sitting on Shawnee and Hopewell land, and I encourage you to go to this website, learn more, and see which lands you are currently sitting on today. So I'll just start by acknowledging some foundational resources. These are resources that I found in my I'm still in my early stages of learning, but I found these resources to be incredibly helpful and urge you to take a look, take a read, take a watch. Some of them have video. These will come up again as I continue to talk, and all of the links to these resources are in the Google Doc that I have shared. And I especially want to call out the first one, the workshop with Alexandra Fiorillo. That was just such a well-encompassing discussion. I just can't recommend it enough. There's a presentation as well as an article, and at the end of her presentation, she has even more resources that I haven't even touched on yet in this presentation. So definitely give that a look. And the books that I've listed here, phenomenal. Still reading some of them, can't recommend them enough. Here are some people to follow. These are some people that I started following kind of early in my stages of looking into inclusive research, and from these people I found more. So I'm just giving these people a quick shout out because from here, you're surely going to be able to find more people and more concepts and more organizations to follow. And I just also want to note that three of these people here, Alba, Vivian, and Sakai. They are the facilitators to a course called Humanity Centered, which I'm currently partaking in right now. And there will be a link to that course if you're interested. There's another cohort of the course starting in a month, I think. And if you're interested, the link is in the Google Doc if you want to learn more. Okay, so what I've been working on for a few months, and it's coming soon, this talk is kind of breaking the ice into what I've been working on and what you can expect. I've been developing this little research primer on GitHub, so it's open source. It's basically going to function as a links library, and I've organized it to try and fit the framework of the stages of a user research practice. So I've separated out links and resources that fit well to thinking about the problem statement or the project creation when you're at the start of your user research project in particular, and then moving on to choosing the research collection method, what resources might be helpful when you're trying to be more inclusive as you're starting to figure out what collection method you're going to use. Same for participant recruitment and the actual conducting of the research. And at the very and there you see synthesis and insights. So the primer will be organized in this manner, and actually in the manner in which I'm going to go through each of these segments here. And will basically just be a list of links and resources that you can read. And when it is ready, I'll post it on the Slack channel. Alrighty, so I'm going to move this if it's in the way of the recording. Okay. All right, so I'm going to step through a few concepts here. We're just going to fly through these concepts. I'm just, again, tip of the iceberg, breaking the ice, just acknowledging what concepts are going to be introduced in this primer. Oh, and I want to note too, before I go too far. So for now, I have called it a thoughtful research primer, and I use the word thoughtful intentionally because I didn't want to just choose any one word from that original list a few slides ago. You know, is this inclusive? Is it liberatory? Is it anti-oppressive? Is it anti-racist? It's all of it. The word thoughtful might change. I'm going to put the word blast it out to some experts and see what they think. So that word might change. Okay. So the first concept that I want to talk about is shifting the research gaze. This has come up in quite a few books and resources that I've read. It's a concept that I've really taken to. This is literally flipping the script on who and what becomes the researched. And I think this book says it the best so far. This and also Ruha Benjamin, she's in the Google Doc. Ruha Benjamin wrote the book Race After Technology. And in her book, and in her talk, I also linked to her talk, one example she gave is instead of researching the oppressed, the peoples who go through the criminal justice system, why aren't we researching, let's say, the judges who deliver unfair sentencings or unfair judgments and rulings? So that's one example. This book, Research as Resistance, which I just put a link to the way you could purchase the book in the Google Doc. And let me just read an excerpt from the book that I think surmises what we're talking about very well as my dog gets a drink. So there's a person, Christine, trying to figure out a research topic. So then one day, as Christine describes it, it came to her what anti-oppressive research was all about. She asked the people labeled as clients in the day home, and in this case, the day home is like a mental health facility, where she worked, if any of them would like to be researchers into why professionals sometimes treat them so badly. Several said yes. She helped them learn about research and design and their own interview questions, and they got to pick the professionals they would interview. Researching up. Shifting the research gaze is also described as researching up. It was an amazing process. They interviewed professionals about their training and attitudes toward people with mental illness and cognitive disabilities. And at the end of the interview, they revealed that they were people living with mental illness and disability. The professionals were shocked, and change happened through the process of the research interviews. These participants, now called interviewers, not clients, have gone on with Christine to present at research conferences and write articles for newsletters, and have been truly empowered to become advocates in their own lives. So that type, you can expect these kind of concepts from this book. I can't recommend it enough. It really gets you to think and reframe, what is your project? Who are you interviewing? Who are you researching, and why? All right, so Rethinking the Invitation to the Table. The presentation by Alexandra Fiorillo really hits on this. Can't recommend it enough. Can't recommend all the resources enough. Just go out there and read. This is, if we're thinking about a co-design project, or even a project where we're not doing a co-design, we're just inviting people to the table to get their voices, we have to think about what a state of power we, the researcher, are in to even say that we are the ones inviting somebody else to the table. And Alexandra really dives into this and presents the concept of, why don't we get rid of the table? Just, get rid of, it's a power structure. She presents it as the researcher is the person in power, and they have the power to invite people to the table. But if the project was really central to the lives of the people who are being researched, why are they not given more a position of power? Really something to think about, especially if you're working in marginalized communities or people who might be vulnerable. Rethinking Objectivity and Bias. Really appreciated the work by Sam Ladner. The link is in the Google Docs. The concept of the researcher as, an objective purveyor of the scientific method is really being critiqued right now and investigated. There's really a call for using qualitative research and rethinking if the scientific method really is objective, because the researcher is ultimately the one defining the question, and the researcher has their own bias. Everyone has bias. You'll see over on the right of the screen there, the Cognitive Bias Codex. Definitely check it out. It lists all the currently known biases that a person can hold, and there are a lot. I haven't counted them. Just looking at it, looks like a couple hundred. Everyone has bias, and there's power in naming your bias and working with your bias and not trying to act like we are completely objective and rational persons. And acknowledging systemic barriers. I've definitely come across this concept talked a lot in the civic tech field. There are user researchers who are working in the government sphere, and government researchers may be trying to investigate why health benefits are so hard to access by certain populations, and we might look at the form, and the form is not usable, the website's not usable, but you have to look beyond that. And the field of service design and civic tech are really thinking holistically about what are the systemic barriers. It might not just be the usability of the website. There may be laws, legislation, power dynamics that are preventing ultimate usability of a service or a product. Alrighty, so then we dive into choosing the research collection method. And of course, we have user interviews, we have surveys. I'm not going to go into all of that. User Research Academy and Nikki have done an excellent job in posting articles, anything you might want to read about interviews and surveys. So I'm just going to present something a little different that's, in the vein of, how can we do any of those methods, interviews, surveys, etc., more inclusively? And something that I've found to be a really great resource is the creative, is to think about community-based research, and the terms participatory and co-design fit under the umbrella. And the Creative Reaction Lab has, go check out their website. They have this equity-centered community design field guide that can really help you better understand community-based research and how you can do it equitably and actionably, as well as authentically. Sometimes, and I've been a part of this, sometimes participatory methods look inclusive, look equitable, but, sometimes you really got to dig deep, and all of this is about doing your work and really understanding the dynamics at play. Highly recommend following the people I noted earlier on Twitter. When I've been looking for resources about how do we recruit for diversity and representation. Still looking for some peer-reviewed articles. If anyone has any, feel free to share. But in the meantime, people that I noted on that Twitter list, like Alba here, have had phenomenal conversations on Twitter about what it means to recruit for diversity and representation. There are different stages of the user research process, like an exploratory stage versus like an evaluative stage, where it might make more sense or you might do it differently. The link to this Twitter conversation is in the resource list. Definitely check it out. I will hopefully have a lot more resources on this topic coming up, and we'll share as I find them. Alrighty, and then conducting the actual research itself. Here, these are just a few topics. There are so many more. For those who have just joined recently, this presentation is not exhaustive. We're just kind of, it's the tip of the iceberg for a few topic conversations. Power imbalances, participant compensation, and co-design, co-facilitating are all discussed in Alexandra Fiorillo's presentation, which, definitely watch it. Power imbalance definitely dovetails with honoring the lived experience and trauma-informed healing-centered design practices. I think there's like a whole conference going on right now about these topics. The Restorative Design Conference that was held by the Greater Good Studio. The link to the videos, they posted all the videos, fortunately, and the link to the videos are in the resource list. Just go watch the videos. Sarah Fahala does an excellent job explaining trauma-informed healing-centered practices. There are quite a few articles and books that you can definitely check out. And as I finish my research repository, those will be included. All right, and then insights and synthesis. Still doing some investigative work myself here. I don't have a lot to share, except I am rather fascinated by personas. I've been doing some research work myself on personas. There's an excellent article by Amber Westerholm Smith. Again, it's in the resource list. And this graphic is from her article, from her Medium article, stripping away demographics. She's really arguing that personas aren't necessarily about demographics. In the grouping might be about a behavior and not something superficial like an income level. So take a read, also take a watch. She has a conference presentation with the UXR Collective, which I'll get that link as well. And it'll be in the research primer is coming soon. Can't wait to share it. Just still finishing it up, tidying it up, making it super user friendly. And I will share it on the Slack channel. And I am going to open this up for any and all questions. And for any of you who joined a little later, I just want to harken back to something I said earlier in this presentation, that I'm not here to be an expert. I'm here to amplify resources and people that I've been learning from, and to help share, these concepts that I think are really important to be universal right now. But if anyone has any questions or comments, anything thought-provoking, I'm going to go ahead and open it up.
I just want to say I'm excited to see your resource list. Thank you for reminding us that that you're putting this together. Do you have any recommendations for like going through all of these things and not getting like overwhelmed, or basically like some sort of way to start it? Is it interest-based, or do you recommend like is some piece of content more introductory than others?
Yeah, thanks, Babs. That's a great question. So actually, let me go ahead and share my screen, sharing the resource list so I can point to things and to talk about them. There we go. Just gotta open it up here. Okay, cool. All right, so when you open the resource list, it looks like this. I would definitely start actually with, it's the very first item. It's the workshop with Alexandra Fiorillo. Give it a watch. I think it's about an hour. This was actually one of the first, or I shouldn't say, it was one of the earlier presentations that I saw when I got invested in this, in the topic and field of inclusive research, and I feel that it touches on every segment of the user research process, which I'm trying to replicate, from project design to participant recruitment to how you synthesize your research. Um, and since it's a video, it's an hour. I feel like it's something you can easily set some time aside for and invest yourself in. From there, I would stick within the foundational resources, because these resources are ones that I've read and that I felt like cover wide sweeping universal topics and set your mind and set your stage for how we're going to think differently about conducting research. They're not necessarily how to's, it's helping you to reframe your mind. um, and the ethical researchers checklist by Alba is actually similar to what I'm essentially trying to do with my research repository. It's a checklist by the user research stages. So when you're setting up your project, when you're recruiting people, there are resources. Um, so fortunately, everything is complementary, but everything's just a little different from each other. Um, and then as you go from there, everything's in the order in which it was presented in this presentation. Some things are duplicated, so I hope you don't get too overwhelmed. It's a long list, but some things are duplicated because, as you'll see, Alexandra's workshop, it's a foundational resource. I would totally start there, but she does talk quite a bit about shifting the research gaze. So I just wanted to note that in that section to remind people, if you're really interested in this topic, Alexandra does talk about it. Um, and then the cognitive bias codex is kind of buried in the middle here, and it's just something cool to look at actually, but from there you would have to Google and research each type of bias yourself. I don't think even if you click on those biases it redirects you to any resource, which is unfortunate. um, but yeah, so hopefully this is a good start for people if they're interested. And the GitHub repository will be, hopefully, my intent is for it to read a little bit more like a literature review, so that you don't necessarily have to go in and read the book. I might call out pieces of the book that I'm trying to amplify.
Hey, thanks. That was really, really interesting. I was curious when you said earlier that you're involved in land research.
Mhm.
Is there a direct correlation between that research you were doing and the desire to be inclusive?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something that I'm even trying to put pen to paper to right now, because a lot of the inequities that we see in the technology sector are doubly seen in the land use sector. Even with the indigenous land acknowledgement that I gave, there are unequal land uses that what do you, like that expand to educational resources to um, there's everything is so connected. It's where do you start? But yeah, go ahead. Were you going to say something else?
Yeah, so having done all this
Mhm.
research, how would you practically apply some of the things you've read about inclusive research back onto the situation where you want to be inclusive if you were asked to do some
Mhm.
research? Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, actually, I've seen quite a few examples pop up where, um, someone may be, let's say that I have a supervisor who tells me that I should just send out a survey, just, super quick and simple. And my hope is that these resources give you enough information to give you pause and to think, well, actually, maybe we should do the survey a little differently. I've actually come into that, that exact example with a project that I'm currently working on, where um, a supervisor wanted to launch a website, just do it super quickly. But and I really had to give pause and bring up a few issues where in the website we are naming things that feel like they are targeting certain people in an unfair way. And so I wanted to step back and ask, why are we saying it like this? Why are we not actually talking to these groups? I think we should actually talk to these groups and integrate them. So my hope is that by reading these resources, it just gives you more pause to think more critically about what you're doing, why you're doing, and how it might affect somebody. And I think it is so applicable not only to technology, but to land use, which is where I've been working for quite a while. It's all interconnected. And that's why these resources are just, they're just so all encompassing, because you can connect them to numerous different fields. I've seen the connection to user research and to land use because that is where I'm involved. But I would be hard pressed to think that you can't involve them in other sectors.
Yeah, no, I just wondered if you'd
Mhm.
had, having read it, found a practical takeout from the,
Yes.
you know what I mean, like an
Oh
actionable
yeah.
one that you could,
Yeah.
okay, I've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
inspired, I'm gonna do this thing differently.
Yes,
Mm.
definitely, definitely. I have seen my thinking and the way that I approach certain projects change dramatically since, and that's why at the very beginning of the presentation, I'm advocating for just continue to read, 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 because especially if you're reading, you know, peer-reviewed, well-accepted, of course you can go down rabbit holes and read things that aren't necessarily substantiated, so don't do that. But this website project that I was working on, it completely changed my perception of how quickly we should launch the website, and if we should launch it without doing a very inclusive research, at least a research framework and mindset and thinking. Because even if we can't do the research, even if we don't have access to the people, maybe then we should step back a couple pages. Maybe we shouldn't publish these pages quite so soon and think a little bit more critically about them. um, and I don't want to, I don't want to give too much away and sound like I'm throwing anyone under the bus. So
Thank
yeah, yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, I've definitely seen a lot of practical results from doing this work.
you.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and thank you all for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to amplify these resources and get the conversation started. Um, if anyone is particularly interested in continuing this conversation, but with a particular focus, because on any of these topics that I presented, you could totally have hours and hours of conversation on any one of them. And it's not an exhaustive list. There could be, there are many more topics that we can add to this conversation. So in the future, if someone has a particular interest to focus on a particular topic, I'm very happy to hear what that might be and to help facilitate.